About 3:30 this morning, I woke up and had an absolute epiphany about this continent that we know as Antarctica. Something hit me like a ton of bricks that I hadn't really thought about in depth before. And in today's video, I'd like to share this with you because it fills in a critical piece of the puzzle, something that we have not been able to explain. How could people survive? What would they be eating, basically? Now, to take you through my line of thinking, we have to go someplace a little bit different. I know Game of Thrones is just a TV show, but when you look at what they're trying to explain, the story they're trying to tell, it does have some real-world analogs. I use this image because it's kind of funny, talking about 70-degree winter is coming. Well, if you knew that quote-unquote winter was coming and that you would have to prepare for a completely different climate, you would make different preparations. In the 7th season of Game of Thrones, there's a scene where Sansa Stark, this character's daughter, is talking about storing away food and prepping, basically, for a long winter, for not being able to grow things, not being able to grow crops. Now, it reminded me of this YouTuber that I have been watching for years and years and years. Her name is The Patriot Nurse, and she talks about beans, bullets, band-aids. All three of those words, of course, beginning with B. The alliteration helps people remember food, self-defense, and medical care. But it's that first word I want to focus on, beans. That takes us back to this picture. This doesn't look to me like just any piece of artwork. We talked about this in another video. One of the big mysteries about this image is, what are these three towers in the back? And what are they storing? Why are they there? They look like grain silos, but the landscape doesn't look like it lends itself very well to grain storage. What about beans? You see, there is a specific kind of bean that can grow in very, very, very cold climates. And it correlates to another story from history about an unexplained event that occurred, and we're going to cover that as well. Now, we know for a fact, science has reported and proven, there is a hidden source of heat somewhere underneath East Antarctica, heating it from below. And the reason that's important is they show the image here. It would create a habitable environment, which they have also talked about being down there. They've gone down into different caverns, and it's been room temperature. They describe t-shirt weather, 70 degrees. It would provide a never-ending source of fresh water and volcanic soil. So you have a temperate climate, you have volcanic soil, you have heat, you have water, you have all of the things that you would need, not to grow all crops, but certain crops. And here's that article here we've talked about before. Warm Antarctic caves harbor secret life. You see, they have found DNA down there they can't identify. Now, I know this is a lot of different pages, but we have to go through this. There is a thing called the Voynich manuscript. It is a book full of images, basically of plants no one can identify, written in a language nobody knows and nobody has ever heard of. On the left, we have this thing called the Phaistos disc. And it has coded images on it on both sides that, once again, nobody can explain. Nobody has deciphered the Phaistos disc or the Voynich manuscript. Now, stick with me on this. We have plants where they have created images that no one knows about, that no one can explain, written in a language that nobody knows. Here's where it all comes together. Here's where it's all going to start to make sense. There's a story from the 12th century called The Green Children of Woolpit. It's about these two children that appeared in England of unusual skin color in this little place called Woolpit, a village in England. The children, brother and sister, had a normal appearance except for the green color of their skin. Pay attention to that. They spoke in an unknown language, and the only food they would eat was beans. But not just any beans. Fava beans. Now, fava beans are ancient, but nobody knows where they came from. It is of uncertain origin. One of the things about fava beans is they grow just about everywhere. Incredibly hardy, can grow in very, very cold climates. And the Romans used to use these in a celebration of Lemuria. And I'll give you the link here to the Wikipedia where they talk about this. Broad beans, also known as, have a long tradition of cultivation in Old World agriculture, being among the most ancient plants in cultivation and also among the easiest to grow. Now, remember beans, bolts, band-aids? If you were going to relocate to a place like Antarctica, or you had trade with a place like Antarctica, this would be something you would provide. You would say, look, you can grow these here. You can grow these in your underground caverns. The children, the green children, reported that they came from, well, the girl explained that she and her brother had come from St. Martin's Land, a subterranean world inhabited by green people. Now, I'm sure a lot of ask, well, what made them green? What made them green? Well, personally, I believe it was the diet. They were on a very limited diet of things that could grow and things that they could find and source in a place that was largely hidden from the sun. What kind of adaptations would happen to a native population of people that were not exposed to normal levels of light? We see what happens to normal human beings after only a few hours out walking around in the dark. Your pupils become huge and your eyes adjust to the light. Well, what if that was going on for centuries? And plus you were somewhat malnourished, from diet. Where did the sea people come from? Now, we'll get to the coral castle here in a minute, but check out this. Chinese man's skin turns green after eating too many snails. See, snails live in very dark environments. This is what I'm going for here. It's something called cholestasis. What we might be looking at, and this beans, bullets, and band-aids thing, focusing on the beans, people down here would live and operate like preppers. They would operate like survivalists. People have said, why don't we go and settle Antarctica? Why don't we go with an expedition? Well, think about that. What would you have to bring? You would have to bring something where you could grow crops. You would have to have very hardy things that could grow in cold environments. In harsh environments, even if you found a place with volcanic soil, never-ending amounts of fresh water, and even a heat source, something that could grow in low light. And that would be your main staple crop, wouldn't it? And this ancient bean, this ancient crop, might have been what the Romans or whomever would have brought in trade. If people had settled down here, people had gone to Western Antarctica, and this is the real key why I started with this, is that the reason Antarctica is frozen over in ice is not because it's at the South Pole exclusively. That helps. But it's because it's isolated at the South Pole, meaning if there was a land bridge from the tip of South America to the western part of Antarctica here, and that's what this little island is right here I'm circling. This is what they call West Antarctica. The big part over here is East Antarctica. If there were a land bridge and these currents could not swirl around the continent, the climate would be drastically different, especially in this western part. It would be a very different place. And even with the ice and snow on the surface, it doesn't preclude life beneath. And that is what the girl reported to people in the 12th century as where she came from. The green skin could easily be explained by a limited diet, meaning the snails, rivers. There are rivers underneath Antarctica. They know about this. There's life existing in places underneath Antarctica that they say should not be there. There was the very infamous picture of this giant core that they had drilled down. I believe it was a Russian core. And they were setting a camera down, and all of a sudden, this little crustacean appears on camera in a place where they thought there would be no life at all. So if they could find that on a continent larger than the whole of Europe, this area right here is bigger than Germany, France, Italy, England, Norway, Sweden, Belgium, every country in Europe. Think of all of the history, just of Germany alone, or France alone. This continent, I truly believe, was probably referred to as Lemuria. And let me see if I can find that here. Hold on a second. Because it is down here. I don't want people to think that I'm making this up about Lemuria. Culinary uses: Algeria, China, Colombia, Ecuador, Egypt, Ethiopia, Greece. I believe it was under other. Hang with me here for 1 minute, guys. Because when I read it, it absolutely floored me, because here it is. In ancient Greece and Rome, beans were used in voting. A white bean was used to cast a yes vote, black no. Even today, the word kukia is used unofficially, referring to the votes. Beans were used as a food for the dead, such as during the annual Lemuria festival. The Lemuralia or Lemuria was a feast in the religion of ancient Rome, during which the Romans performed rites to exorcise the malevolent and fearful ghosts of the dead from their homes. This is, I mean, to me, this is the smoking gun. When you think about it in the context of beans, bullets, and band-aids, and by the way, thank you, Patriot Nurse, very much for your awesome content. If anybody hasn't seen the Patriot Nurse, you really should. It's an excellent, excellent resource on YouTube. This is what they would do. They would need to have the ability to grow food, and any food they would import would have to be hardy, and they would have to be able to store it. And one final thing also about this image. It shows two contrasting things. This large door, let me see if I can zoom this in. Is too narrow to be a carriage entrance, a carriage door. It's far too narrow for that. Plus, it's on a slanted slope upward. You would never make this way. You would level this out. Plus, look at where the lights are. This looks like walkway lighting. I have two little tiny lights outside on the pillars in front of my front door. It looks exactly like walkway lighting. This is a door meant for a giant. And when you look at the windows of this structure, there are clearly rooms meant for a giant and rooms meant for normal people. Look at the size of the windows. And these towers in back, That's smoking gun for me. That is absolutely smoking gun. There are some things here that just don't jive with the style of the architecture. I believe the building is very old, but it's been repurposed. Things have been discovered, and there's a part of history that I think we are going to, in the next 50 to 100 years, see that's going to absolutely floor people. The Voynich manuscript, the Antikythera device, the story of the Sea Peoples, the Green Children of Woolpit, the Phaistos disc. All of these things point to something that can't be explained in normal history. And it comes down to something just as simple as beans, bolts, and band-aids. What were they growing? How did they eat? How did they survive? And I'll leave it there. Like, share, subscribe.